There is an affliction invisible to the eye that erodes without pain, destroys without blood, yet its impact is overwhelming. The 20th century promised us everything: liberty, technology, endless consumption. However, what we actually received was a world where the transient vanishes and emptiness expands. Pier Paolo Pasolini foresaw this before anyone else. He observed society and saw decay disguised as advancement, bodies filled with artificial wants but devoid of genuine human substance. They sell us joy in the form of a new iPhone, telling us we are free while algorithms dictate our thoughts. They offer us Instagram but remove our ability to feel anything lasting more than a few moments. Pasolini termed this cultural annihilation. For him, true totalitarianism was not the kind that arrived with military force and fiery speeches, but the kind that silently established itself, eliminating all resistance, replacing culture with consumption, desire with compulsion, and identity with emptiness. The paradox is harsh. The more we possess, the less we are. What we call freedom is actually a script carefully written for us to keep consuming, obeying, and existing within an order where defiance has already been incorporated into the system. There is no revolution anymore because rebellion has become a commodity. Che Guevara t-shirts are sold in the same stores where you buy Puma. Chaos has become trendy, the void celebrated. Pasolini, in his time, denounced this with a sharp and unyielding gaze. He saw television transforming everything into a spectacle, culture becoming mere decoration. What would he say today in the age of TikTok, where everything lasts 15 seconds and then vanishes, where indignation is just a shareable post and misery is a backdrop for influencer selfies? Modern society has not only embraced aesthetic and moral decay but has turned it into a fetish, into capital. Here we reach the core of the matter, the aesthetics of degradation. Pasolini knew that the destruction of values did not occur through direct assault, but through their gradual dilution. Revolutionary ideas are no longer censored. They are just made irrelevant. So, we continue floating in an ocean of distractions where everything becomes content and nothing has weight. We live in the empire of the ephemeral, in the triumph of image over essence, in the exaltation of the surface at the expense of depth. The mirror of modernity is shattered, and its reflection is a nightmare of smiling faces empty of any essence. Bodies walk, talk, laugh, but they are lifeless. What does it mean to be alive when the soul has already been sold in installments? What does it mean to exist when your individuality has been reduced to a profile, a feed, an avatar? The culture of degradation has turned us into smiling zombies, voracious consumers of our own misery. Pasolini foresaw this. He saw the body as a battleground where power imposed its relentless logic. Today, that logic has become more refined. It is no longer imposed by force, but by desire. You crave what enslaves you, need what empties you. The tragedy of modern humans is not knowing that they will die, but knowing that they are already dead. Pasolini saw not only political totalitarianism as a threat, but also the totalitarianism of consumption, which reduced human individuality to a market function. Pornography is not only in explicit films, but in the commercialization of existence. Everything is a performance. Everything is sellable. The body, once sacred, has become a product. It can be shaped, retouched, bought, and discarded. Identity has become a commodity like any other. Philosopher Byung-Chul Han, updating Pasolini's vision, unfolds within the framework of a society so thoroughly exhausted that it no longer needs visible chains or overt tyrants to enforce submission. He describes a world where oppression has become internalized. There are no longer bars on the windows or guards in towers because the prison exists within us. We are both prisoners and wardens, locked in a loop of self-imposed discipline masked as liberty. Each day we exhaust ourselves in service to a system designed not to elevate us, but to extract from us until nothing remains. We smile through the fatigue, mistaking the illusion of choice for actual autonomy. But what exactly do we trade in for this illusion of freedom? The cost is steep. It is our very bodies, turned into containers for momentary pleasures, disconnected from meaning or purpose. In this world, the pursuit of perfection is not merely a personal goal. It has become a doctrine, an ideology, a subtle form of totalitarianism. But this is not a totalitarianism of uniforms and speeches. It is far more insidious. There are no military marches, no propaganda posters, no authoritarian voices booming from balconies. Instead, the dictatorship lives in our devices, in our mirrors, in our curated images. Beauty becomes a performance, curated pixel by pixel through filters and apps. This is fascism stripped of its theatrics and clothed in narcissism. It doesn't need to command obedience. It sells it. The mirror becomes the new judge, the app the new enforcer. And yet, we do not rebel. We participate. We shape ourselves to fit its demands, all while believing we are exercising freedom. Pasolini saw through this deception long before it became visible to the masses. What he revealed was not just a critique. It was a diagnosis of a culture sick with itself. Pasolini once described the Italian youth not as alive, but as corpses unaware of their own death, a haunting metaphor that has only grown more accurate with time. Today, we are not just metaphorical corpses, we are highly efficient ones. We live as ultra-productive ghosts, permanently online, relentlessly accessible, eternally in pursuit of the next thing that promises fulfillment but never delivers. The tragedy lies in the fact that we call this life. In this era, the illusion of happiness is not just sold, it is mass-produced, packaged, branded, and relentlessly advertised. We chase it through brief dopamine spikes, the glow of a notification, the quick thrill of a purchase, the empty climax of casual sex, the scrolling of endless content. But none of it satisfies. The body, once a site of protest, of revolution, of visceral defiance, is now repurposed as a neatly packaged prison cell. Pasolini understood that true rebellion does not mean breaking a rule. It means refusing to play by rules altogether. But how can one refuse when participation is embedded in our sense of self? From childhood, we are taught to say yes before we ever learn what no truly means. The brilliance of the system lies in its subtlety. It does not scream commands. It whispers desires. It does not shackle our limbs. It seduces our minds. We believe we are choosing when we are only responding to pre-installed desires. And so we march, perfect, polished corpses, through shopping malls lit like temples, offering our time, attention, and souls to a machine that grows stronger the more we feel hollow. We have become sacred offerings to a god of emptiness, worshiping under the false light of screens. The system doesn't demand sacrifice, it convinces us to volunteer, and the tragedy is, we do it smiling. Degradation, in Pasolini's view, is not a mere consequence of progress, it is a deliberate strategy. It is not a tragedy that befalls us. It is a project in which we participate, knowingly or not. We are the victims, yes, but we are also the enablers. We consume what degrades us. We smile as we surrender. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, pleasure transforms. It ceases to be a path toward deeper connection or inner awakening and becomes a prison built of desires we never chose. Feeling, once the sacred pulse of our humanity, is now a checkbox, an algorithmic suggestion, an obligation. Happiness, once elusive and meaningful, is no longer a personal journey. It is a product, a requirement, something to be performed on command. Pasolini foresaw this with terrifying clarity. Consumer society doesn't just create needs. It insists on their instant gratification. The failure to feel pleasure becomes a fault, a flaw, a defect to be fixed or discarded. This new power does not operate by denying us access. It overwhelms us with it. It does not forbid. It floods. It does not say no. It says yes to everything, dissolving all boundaries. In this flood, meaning disappears. There is no longer a tyrant to overthrow, no centralized evil to confront. There is only noise, endless choices, perpetual stimulation, and still we feel less. Suffering, once part of the soul's journey, is now diagnosed, medicated, and silenced. Feeling bad is no longer part of being human. It is seen as a glitch. Those who struggle are erased from visibility. If you are not smiling, you are malfunctioning. If you are not enjoying, you are broken. But here lies the cruelest irony. The more pleasure we are offered, the more we are drained. What was once abundance is now emptiness in disguise. There is no longer anything sacred, nothing untouchable, nothing that cannot be commodified, altered, or packaged into content. Modern society, in its relentless forward motion, destroyed all its gods but offered no new myths, no fresh meaning, no substitute for the divine silence it created. The aftermath is a world where everything is available, everything is disposable, even pain, even death. Pasolini viewed this not as a simple evolution, but as a profound and unforgivable crime against the spirit. For him, sacredness was not confined to churches or rituals. It was present in anything with intrinsic worth, in anything that demanded reverence, that resisted reduction to metrics, monetization, or media cycles. Traditions have always been questioned, challenged, and reformed throughout history. That's natural. But what happened in modernity was far more radical. Traditions were shattered without being replaced. In their place, nothing was built. No new values emerged. No deeper connection was fostered. Just a vacuum. And into this void rushed a new kind of poverty, not economic, but spiritual. This is what Pasolini feared most. Not material decadence, but the erasure of transcendence. When the myths die, when the gods are mocked, when reverence becomes outdated and irony becomes the only acceptable posture, we are left in a desert, dry, expansive, and meaningless. And within this desert, what was once sacred has turned into performance. Death is no longer a moment of solemnity. It is a live stream. Tragedies are not mourned. They're monetized. Pain is not shared. It is staged. We scroll through suffering with detachment, double-tapping despair. We see war through viral clips, starvation through cinematic filters, and grieving faces, framed for maximum engagement. Pasolini warned us, when the sacred is replaced by spectacle, we lose our ability to feel deeply, to honor life, to connect with anything greater than ourselves, and that is the real apocalypse. Pasolini wrote about the prostitution of culture, but today it is not only art that has been sold. Existence itself has been transformed into merchandise. Every life is a display case, every emotion an asset, every thought monetizable data. And what happens when the sacred dies, when nothing else is inviolable? The answer is all around us. Generalized anxiety, epidemic depression, a feeling that nothing really matters because nothing matters when everything can be reduced to consumption. The meaning Pasolini saw in society was a silent mourning, a sadness that no one dared name. Today, that sadness screams on every screen, but few can hear it. The human mind has never been so full and never so empty. We live bombarded by information, stimuli, notifications, messages that demand immediate response. But when is there calm? When does the screen turn off? When no one calls, what remains? An unbearable silence, an absence that burns a hole we cannot fill. Pasolini saw this happening in the 1970s, but today the prophecy has been realized. What he called cultural genocide has become a neuroscientific phenomenon. Modern psychology studies show that excess stimuli destroy the ability to concentrate, create a chemical addiction to dopamine, and lead to depression. Byung-Chul Han calls it the society of performance. There is no longer a boss exploiting us. Now we are the ones who force ourselves to be productive, to always be available, to never rest. Neuroscience confirms what Pasolini already sensed. We live in a system that reprograms our brains to be eternally dissatisfied consumers. Immediate pleasure destroys the ability to feel real pleasure. The excess of choices paralyzes us. The need for constant exposure corrodes our identity. The problem is not just philosophical, it is physical. Studies show that depression and anxiety have grown exponentially in the past 30 years alongside the rise of digital culture. Happiness, once a mood, has become a market product. What Pasolini called the destruction of authenticity is now a measurable phenomenon. The more someone tries to adapt to what the system demands, the more unhappy they become. And here lies the cruelest, most insidious truth of our time. The machine of emptiness is flawless, seamless in design, and terrifyingly seductive. It doesn't require chains or commands. It doesn't need to oppress us by force. It simply teaches us to want what it offers. We consume not because we are forced, but because we believe consumption is the pathway to identity. We long to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be validated by likes, comments, and followers. We mold our lives into shareable fragments, filtered realities, performative moments. We become products, willingly packaged for display. How then do we escape a system that no longer exists outside us, but inside our very minds? How do we resist a force that programs our desires, hijacks our pleasures, and rewires our sense of self? Pasolini, with his prophetic clarity, offered a radical answer. Negation. The complete rejection of consumption as self-worth, the refusal to pursue pleasure as a metric of value, the decision not to participate in the spectacle that devours the human spirit. But this negation isn't a slogan. It is an existential leap. It demands discomfort, uncertainty, and the courage to abandon everything that feels familiar. It asks us to live without the distractions, the anesthetics, the small doses of digital morphine that keep us functioning within the machine. It requires staring into the terrifying void of emptiness and resisting the urge to flee. Yet, paradoxically, it is within this silence, this internal darkness, that we might rediscover something truly ours, something unbranded, unbought, and unbroken. Perhaps it is only there, in the quiet rebellion against compulsion, that the real revolution begins. Not in the streets, not on screens, but within each individual who dares to say no. Not a loud no, but a still, sovereign one. There is no longer any sacredness left. Nothing is deemed untouchable. Nothing remains inviolable, and nothing is eternal in this age of relentless commodification. Modern society, in its thirst for novelty and control, shattered the divine, dismantled every myth, and burned the altars, only to leave a vacuum behind. All the gods were killed, but no new gods rose to replace them. What remains is a barren landscape where everything can be consumed, marketed, and turned into digital content. Even the most intimate experiences, even pain, even death itself. Pasolini recognized this cultural collapse as more than just a shift. It was an irreparable moral crime. For him, the sacred resided not only in temples or texts, but in anything that held intrinsic, non-negotiable value. A gesture, a silence, a human face, a story unshared. These were things that could not, should not be reduced to likes, clicks, or currency. Yet today, they are. The crisis we face is not that traditions were questioned. Questioning is part of progress. The deeper tragedy is that once torn down, those traditions were never replaced with new, meaningful narratives. In their place, society offered hollow simulations and empty rituals. What we inherited is not freedom, but spiritual poverty. Pasolini warned us, the danger is not materialism, but the absence of transcendence. When we mock the sacred, when myths are reduced to memes and reverence to irony, we are left with a desert, a lifeless, echoing space where depth no longer exists. And in this desert, the sacred is no longer preserved, it is prostituted. Death becomes content, grief becomes a thumbnail, pain becomes engagement. We live-stream tragedy, we hashtag suffering, we perform heartbreak for views, and in doing so, we lose the ability to feel anything that cannot be monetized. The sacred is gone, and, with it, something essential to being human,